Hello Year 11 and welcome to this virtual induction session on History A-Level. My name is Miss Harrison and I am Head of History and second in charge of Sixth Form at Holmer Green Senior School. Just going to give you a brief overview of the History A-Level course we offer here, our expectations and what you should expect from your bridging work. So the first unit that I want to talk to you about is your Democracy and Dictatorship in Germany, 1919 to 1963. This is your paper 2. It is worth 15% of your overall A-level grade and you sit a 60-minute exam. In that exam you have a choice of 2 questions which is split into part A and part B. So if you answer question 1A, you have to then answer question 1B. You can't answer 1A and 2B, but you do have that choice between question 1 and question 2. Part A is a 10 marker, so roughly about a side of A4, and part B is a 20 mark essay question, so roughly 4 pages. You start by looking at the impact of the end of the First World War on Germany. I don't imagine there's very many of you who haven't studied something to do with Germany. Some of you might have studied the Weimar Republic before and what life was like in Germany during the 1920s. Some of you might have only studied what life was like living under Nazi rule. That's fine, we start from the same point and you will see in the bridging work what I mean by that. But we look at the 1920s, the impact of the Treaty of Versailles on Germany, politically, economically, socially. And then moving through to the golden age of the 1920s in Germany, was that actually real or just an illusion? Then looking at kind of the climate that was created in order to enable the Nazis to rise to power, Hitler and his henchmen, and how they took over Germany with their ideologies in the 1930s. Then the impact of the Second World War on Germany, again, politically, economically, socially. So we look at things like rationing and the impact of bombing, as well as kind of an economic move to total war and the impact that had on the country. Then we move to look at the end of World War II and essentially the beginnings of the Cold War, so considering how Germany was divided up between Britain, France, America and Russia, and how they had conflicting points of view about how Germany should be governed, about how politically each parts of the country should be ruled and how they should provide for their people in terms of education and the role of women in society, etc., before then building up to looking at things like the Berlin blockade and the creation of the Berlin Wall. You will also study the Tudors. We focus on the early Tudors. Your written exam for this is 90 minutes long, and this unit is worth 25% of your overall A-level. In terms of exam structure, you have essay questions, choice 1 of 2. They will be on Henry VII and Henry VIII. You might get 2 questions on Henry VII, 2 questions on Henry VIII. There's no guarantee that it will be 1 on either of the Henrys. And then you also have 4 sources, and those will be focusing on mid-Tudor crisis. So we start with Henry VII, who is perhaps an underappreciated monarch, especially when looking at the Tudor dynasty, but we consider how he managed to come from being a nobody to being King of England, the moves he made politically, the alliances he made in order to secure himself. We look at the threats to his reign, so people who wanted to get rid of him. England at the time has just come out of the War of the Roses. civil war, essentially, and the work that Henry has to do in order to stabilise the country, which enables him to then be the first monarch in nearly 100 years to pass the throne successfully to his son. So we look at that and how he negotiates with foreign powers to secure his dynasty, to protect his throne, and to create trade links and treaties in order to make sure his country is a contender on the European stage. We then look at Henry VIII. His reign is kind of split into two. You have up until 1529, when you've got young Henry, kind of pre-divorce Henry, which then focuses on case studies with Cardinal Wolsey, Henry's chief minister for his early years, and the way in which the country was ruled during that time compared to post 1530, looking at Thomas Cromwell as key minister, the reasons for the Henrician Reformation, how his foreign policy ideas changed as he aged, and whether or not different people at court exploited him, or was he always kind of the puppet master in control. We then go on to look at mid-Tudor crisis. This is what your sources will be based on in your exam. So essentially we look at Henry's transition to Edward and the problems with Edward VI. He is only a child when he comes to the throne, he's in his minority, the issues that brings. We then look at Lady Jane Grey and Edward's attempt to change the succession plan, and then the rise of Mary. Whilst considering that, we also look at the religious changes that each of those brings with them to the country and the threats to their rule, so any rebellions that come along as well. As part of your course, you have to complete an NEA. This is essentially your non-exam assessment and is internally marked by me, but then gets sent to the exam board for moderation. This is an essay-based project on a topic of your choice. So we recommend that you complete this piece of work on either paper 1 or paper 2, i.e. the Tudors or Germany, because it's worth 20% of your overall A level. So essentially you would then be boosting your knowledge, say if you chose to complete it on the Weimar Republic, that then takes your Germany element from 15% to essentially 35%. You have to complete this independently. We work to make sure that you've got an exam question that is viable and is approved by the exam board. You have to look at primary sources and complete evaluations of historians' opinions. I will provide you with exemplar material, but it can really be on anything of your choosing. Just bear in mind the strengths of your teachers and your own limitations. So for example, if you wanted to conduct a piece of coursework on the French Revolution and you don't speak French, you're going to struggle to be able to interpret those primary sources, and Google Translate is not a reliable source for completing this. So those are things you need to keep in mind when I say it's completely free rein. You have to bear in mind your limitations. You then have the Renaissance. This is the weightiest contributing element to your A level. This is your paper 3. It is a 2.5 hour exam that is worth 40% of your overall A level. You have an interpretation question, so you'll be given 2 historians' opinions on a particular event, one of your depth studies, and you have to compare them. Are they accurate? What do you know from your own knowledge to support or challenge what is in that interpretation, and therefore which one is the most accurate interpretation of that particular event? And that is worth 30 marks. You then have a choice. You've got 3 essay questions and you need to complete 2 out of 3, and they are worth 25 marks each. This is a rather unique opportunity. There are very few schools who study the Renaissance. It links so very well with the Tudor unit because essentially it's covering a very similar time frame. So you've got that contextual knowledge about what is happening in Europe during the designated years of the course. It also, if you are interested in art, links really well with that, but that's not the sole focus of the course. So we do look at artistic and cultural developments in terms of how technology kind of has an impact on these things. So, for example, the invention of the printing press had an impact on artistic and cultural development. Wars will have had an impact on artistic and cultural development, and we consider how these things changed and are different in different locations at different times. So England has a later Renaissance than the rest of Europe because they've been fighting in the Wars of the Roses, and therefore they don't have that economic freedom to pay for luxuries like the arts because all of the money is going into funding wars. Whereas somewhere like Italy, which is the main focus of our studies for this part of the course, doesn't have that problem. They have a very wealthy collection of city-states and rely on trade, so are able to experiment with the latest materials and get influence from different cultures from around the world through their diverse travelling experiences. We do look at religion and religious change, so again links to the Tudors with the Reformation, but we look at how that has had an impact on other areas within Europe, particularly France and Germany, and then the impact of war, how things like forts were redesigned as a result of the Renaissance, the introduction of gunpowder, and how that theme then transcends into different works of art. You also have to investigate certain things in detail. This is for your depth studies and is what you'll be given your interpretations on. So this could be on the Venetian Renaissance. So we look at how the Renaissance develops in Venice, key artists such as Titian and their contribution to the Renaissance. Your next one is Savonarola. He is a religious figure who was dominant in Florence towards the end of the 1400s and plays a really important role with the Medici family, which you may have heard of if you've been watching Netflix series on the Medici. That's pretty good. And then your last depth study that you could be asked your interpretation question on is on the French Renaissance. So we look at kind of the role of the monarchy of France in patronising the arts. Leonardo da Vinci actually goes and lives at French court for the last years of his life. We look at French architecture and case studies into artworks and artists as well as thinkers. So there is an element of philosophy to this side of the course as well, looking at humanism, Erasmus, Thomas More, etc. In year 12, you have one lesson a week with Miss Kinghorn. She delivers the Germany element of our course. So you will need to make sure that you bring your textbooks and your folders for Germany to her lessons, and then you have 3 lessons a week with me. I deliver in that time the Tudor part of the course, and then towards the end of the year in the summer term we begin your NEA coursework, so that you're already in a really strong place to conduct the bulk of your research for that over the summer holidays. And then in year 13 we have 4 hours a week with me, and during that time we spend 3 hours a week on the Renaissance, and then an hour we rotate between Tudor revision, Germany revision, and completing your NEA. So that revision is embedded into your year 13 course. Things you need to do: you've got to get your folders, so you're going to need 2 folders, lever arch folders, ring binders, the usual ones. They're not going to be enough. This isn't an easy course and there's lots of scholarship involved. which requires lots of pre-reading, so you're going to need a folder to make sure you stay organised. You do need to buy the required textbooks, so the images were at the top of the screen. Start with Germany and the Tudors, don't worry about the Renaissance until we're later down the line, but they need to be purchased ready for your first lesson. They are on your bridging work documents, so if you haven't got that, let me know and I can send it to you. You do need to come prepared for your lessons, so pens, paper, glue, stationery, etc., especially because given the current climate we aren't sharing stationery, so make sure you're prepared with that. Bridging work, so you've been set bridging work for both Germany and for the Tudors. The Tudors starts with an overview of the War of the Roses, so you've got some kind of context to what Henry was facing when he was trying to become king, and then there's a link to a documentary that I'd like you to watch with some worksheets. There are quotes to help you through it, but I don't just want you to look at that quote, you need to annotate it. What does this tell us? What does it help form an impression of Henry regarding, etc. Then for Germany, there's some links to podcasts which we'd like you to make notes on. Essentially, it's giving you an overview of First World War Germany and the situation that Germany as a country found itself in at the end of the First World War. These activities are going to give you such a strong foundational knowledge for coming into this course. It's vital that you complete it, especially because some of you might not have had anything to do with any of this subject knowledge before. It really is a predetermining factor as to whether or not you will be successful. There is also a lot of key terminology that we'd like you to find the definitions for. This will make it a much smoother process, and you will feel much more confident being literate in your course material as you go through. Positive attitude is always helpful. So history is not easy. There is a lot of reading, a lot of writing, but it's also a subject that develops a lot of love of subject. It's fantastic for being supportive of other subjects in terms of the skills you learn, be it learning how to reference and avoid plagiarism in your NEA coursework, being able to construct academic arguments, being able to research, being able to present. It's a fantastically broad subject and really will stand you in good stead for the future. So it's important that you come with the right attitude, ready to learn and immerse yourself in your study of history. If there's anything that you need from me, please do let me know. If you've got any questions about course content, our expectations, or any of the bridging work. If you would like me to drop you a hard copy of it, let me know and I can pop it in the post for you if that would be easier. My email address is on the screen and I'm always just at the other end of an email, so please don't hesitate to get in touch if there is anything I can do for you.